Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the BTR stream. I am your humble host, Lev Polyakov, and we have with us once again Giovanni Panacchietti and our guest of honor today. This is kind of a continuation of the sewing discourse we had with Owen earlier. We've got Owen Cyclops in the stream all the way live, and I'm so grateful, Owen, for you joining us today to briefly pick up on certain pieces that we were talking about before. And I would love to go to Gio to initiate this conversation, but first, once again, all new people subscribe right now. Anyway, Gio, take it away, buddy.
Stream's so nice, we had to do it twice.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here for sure.
Yeah, well, we were originally going to do the psychedelic stream, but what we're going to do, we will touch on the topic, but next time when we do get Daniel Penchbeck on, we'll structure it more as a debate format, because there's certain parts of his book that I wanted to pick apart. But cool. In terms of Owen Cyclops, it's very... Oh, sorry, did I cut you off, Owen? Sorry.
No, man, I said cool. I'm down. That sounds
great.
Yeah.
And because the thing is, you would be perfect for it, because I guess we'll get into taking off from what we did last time in terms of your journey. But before we get into that, please like, share, subscribe, comment, Patreon, please. Me and Lev and Jules do not make any fucking money off of this. All the money goes to administration costs, just to bring you the good content that you crave for. So now that I have my San Pellegrino, we're going to get into this.
That's where the Patreon bucks go. The San Pellegrino.
Exactly, keeping me. There was this viral tweet about the restructuring of this Roman emperor. Looks almost exactly like my nonno. So
nice.
R.I.P. nonno.
A lot of New Jersey energy in some of the ones that I've seen.
One of my mutuals said that Varge Vickners was suspiciously quiet about that tweet, so I don't know. About Nordicis BTFO'd. Bleep Sama Bab, fuck you. No, I'm sorry. I love Bronze Age Prayer. Hopefully one day he will grace his presence on Breakthroughs. So, but I mean, I don't have a beef with Nordicis. Put it that way. I know, being half Southern Italian, half Central Italian, that my bloodline is not pure Indo-Aryan, but it's pure enough. So, and maybe we'll get into esoteric race science, Owen.
I was just telling my wife in the car, we were talking about people, trash talking other countries, and I said I feel like I've learned the most about European countries from hearing Europeans trash talk each other.
It's true.
It's like a deep dive into the culture, so it bears some fruit, I guess.
It's like what I think it was Landshark that said, I just want to go to small towns around Europe and North America and just stay there for a few weeks and absorb the local color. And I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah.
The American local color, by the way, I just don't want to forget, you had that beautiful picture of the various coffees you would get at gas stations. So is that something like this Americana that you got attracted to eventually over time, or did you always have this kind of hometown longing? Or were you just like, fuck these coffees, I fucking hate these gas stations, I don't want to be here? What's the vibe?
I think there is like a deep Americana aspect to my whole vibe and my interests for sure. I mean, I think as everyone gets older, they kind of like start to embody their, I guess, background more, or maybe they haven't really thought about it. You're growing up, you feel like, oh, I'm just like a default random person, but then you're like, oh, I am like American. Like, what's the deal with that? So yeah, I feel like there is I have an interesting relationship to like Americana. Also, America's weird because you grow up in one place, but then there's all the other like sub-regions. So I feel like it does have that, traveling into the unknown flavor inherently within it. I don't know what it's like in like smaller European countries, but for America, that's the case, definitely. I mean, I was talking to someone before, I've never even been to like the desert, which is a huge part of the American landscapes. So that like unknown travel-y element, I think is like intrinsically there for sure.
It seems that there is a vibe going on. And in certain ways, I would say that the artwork and the illustration that you do, it does tend to make sense within the American context. There is certain aspects of American culture, but also the blending of different influences in general. Like, for example, I'm looking at this one piece you did. Just something about it reminds me of my and I know I bash him a lot, I call him Kitsch, but it reminds me of Alex Gray's Cosmic Christ, this illustration, because he has a bit of UFOs in it. It's called God versus Aliens. And Lev, if you could bring that up, that'd be amazing. This is I'm assuming Mary cutting the head off of a gray, and it's got like the chopped head serpent in the deep. Carl Jung illustrated something similar. It has the naval cross, and it's got like the alien abducting someone. I love that because it seems to me that can only exist within the American context, in this convergence of different influences from the UFO ufology to the New Age, like end times biblical Christian movement. And to me, that's just like in itself a piece of Americana, just dabbling in these different subcultures. But
don't forget, you can get this shirt on Spotify, by the way.
Yes.
So not Spotify, it was Shopify. I mean, forgive me for confusing the two.
But what do you think, Owen? Do you think that there is a certain vibe to like American, what would you say, Americana, but also like the outsider aspects of American art, like within not just art, but also like in general? I guess you could say that conspiracy theories in itself are kind of like an art, or they bring about a certain aesthetics, because you seem to dabble in a lot of these different strains.
Yeah, I'm definitely a product of that in some ways, for sure. It's interesting, yeah, like you mentioned, like the connection between even like UFO stuff and America. Yeah, it's weird. Like there are alien abductions in other places, but it is like a really American thing in a way. I think there's something about the American spirit. It's something I thought about a lot because, I used to be really into Buddhism, and whatever we talked about this last time a tiny bit, whatever country that goes to, it kind of takes on the air of that, that people and culture. And Christianity is like that in a way, maybe not to the same degree, but you can look around Europe and see the different like manifestations of Christianity. But I feel like America really has a unique take on all that. There's a book that I really liked. It made a big impression on me a long time ago, called American Scriptures by Penguin, the publisher. And the premise of the book is that as Americans were expanding west into this unknown world, they, quote unquote, needed these like new manifestations of religion to suit their new situation. And within a very short time period, you get, the Book of Mormon and Christian Scientism and the Shakers and all these other, random ones that most people haven't even heard about. So I think that kind of like thirst is part of the American situation. And also our disconnect with Europe. Like we're a European, or we used to be, there's this connection to Europe inherently, where obviously there's a direct tie, but then also we're literally across the ocean, in this wilderness. So there's this kind of desperate, like trying to reach through the veil, kind of a paranoia that all kind of comes together into, conspiracy theories, weird American religion, people always trying to predict the apocalypse. That's very American. All those things. Yeah, it all comes together to form like a cohesive tapestry for me.
And I wanted to, I wanted to ask you, did you watch the recent Adam Curtis documentary? It seems to be all the rage.
What is it called?
It's called, it's like the 4-hour. I just gunned through it. I
Can't Get You Out of My Head. That's what it's called.
Can't Get You Out of My Head. That one.
Well, no, apparently it went out of your head, Gio.
The title did, but the in it they mentioned which I think is a flawed essay, and I was talking about this online with Jeffrey Schulenberger about the essay by Hofstadter about American paranoia. And in some ways it seems that conspiracy theory is deeply ingrained within the American psyche, and even just the nature of spectacle itself. So
definitely.
Well, I didn't see the... go on.
Just really quick, since we touched on that, one of my favorite like academic facts that you can verify to drop is like the paranoia about the conspiracy thing is so intrinsically American that in the University of Virginia archives that you can go into online, there are letters from George Washington himself where he talks about like the Illuminati and these like secret organizations. So it's been like part of the American psyche from like literally probably before day one.
There is also the aspect that I remember Aryan Cowboy. Money. Hey, Alexandra, how are you?
Hi. Yeah, look at our money. Like, come on. We love Illuminati shit. We love all that noise.
Definitely. Well, when it comes to the thing that Aryan Cowboy told me a while back, he was talking about the Antifa members that are living in Washington, D.C., kind of around his stomping grounds. Wait, did I say Washington, D.C.? Sorry, I meant Washington State, Olympia, those areas of the Cascade Mountains. And his theory is that a lot of the ways that they're acting over there has to do with the spiritual influences of the land itself. That there are these nature spirits that don't really get a chance to...
Gods.
Well, what do you think? Why do you think that there's such a thing as Cascadian black metal? I mean, it's got to have something to do with it. By the way, yes, I do have the Riza Negrestani book on Cascadian black metal. But I wanted to eventually talk about your conversion to Christianity. But I wanted to get your feeling on so now that we're talking about America, I wanted to read for both you and Lev and Alexandria this quote by Jean Baudrillard in his book America. It says, "America is the original version of modernity. We are dubbed or subtitled version. America is a subtitled version. America ducks." Yeah, this is so America ducks the question of origins. It cultivates no original or mythic authenticity. It has no past and no founding truth. Having no primitive accumulation of time, it lives in a perpetual present. Wow, I don't know. That's a very controversial take. I wonder.
So my first reaction to that is that America was basically built on essentially an apocalypse. The native population dwindled rapidly. It was dwindling even before white settlers arrived, and kind of part of their success was that it was, a culture in decline, and plus disease, plus displacement. Generally speaking, we kind of wiped out a pre-existing history, and then had to remake it. So there is sort of an almost phantasmagorical kind of a ghostliness to American, America as a concept, America as an entity, America is a mythic entity.
And we have called it the phantasmagorical side.
And we have, by the way, from Reagan Lodge, $2 shout out to Owen, one of my fave artists on this scene. And to what Alexandra said, I'm curious, Owen, what you think about this. There were these photographs I saw where the Native American tribes, they were wearing certain ornaments that look very Masonic in their design. And to me, that's... Well, hold on. You gotta let me finish. So, okay. and this speaks, I'm gonna let you finish. And this speaks to this idea that I have of these antediluvian civilizations existing back in the day that were autistically obsessed with mathematics and the secrets of the universe and the stars, and how it was
quantum mechanics, the secrets of the universe,
exactly
better than Justin Bieber,
and how it was a coastal civilization. How it was a coastal civilization that ended up perishing in the end, and the survivors had to start anew, which is why we see similar things when it comes to the kind of pantheon of the quote-unquote gods and the things that these civilizations, the things that the survivors brought to what became the new civilizations. If we're talking about South America, if we're talking about the Middle East, I'm curious, Owen, what do you think of that whole theory? I guess it's sort of like a Graham Hancock type theory, but let me know what you think. First, Owen, and everybody else.
I have nothing to say. I don't even know what antediluvian means.
Antediluvian, pre-flood. Owen, let us know what you think.
Noah's flood?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm really big on that for sure. The whole Atlantis thing is something that really turned me on to a lot of weird topics initially in the beginning. I think that there's two aspects to it. I think that it's definitely spiritually true in the way that a mythology can be true. So there are literal aspects to it, but I think that it points to something literal. I mean, something that actually is real, even if there wasn't a literal island called Atlantis. I think that's part of why it really ropes a lot of people in, because there are these ancient connections between cultures that most people don't know about or that seem really unintuitive. There's a lot of cool examples I can go through because I was really, really, really into it. But as for literally, I think that there was more globally connected cultures, and that there are these fallen civilizations that existed that we don't know about. So for me, it hovers right on the edge of literal versus mythological and pointing to something deeper. But on my shelf here, I have I'm looking at them right now, multiple books that are history of Atlantis and things like that. That was a big part of my coming up in the game, you could say.
Well, even with the god.
Oh no, sorry. We're talking about this. Sorry, go ahead, Lev.
Well, even with the gods, though, you have, let's say, Shiva, Shakti, you have these representations of abstract concepts, like death and balance and all that stuff. But then when you're talking about certain gods out there like Zeus or Indra, you're talking about this powerful entity, and I don't remember what the Mesopotamian equivalent of that is. Either it's Enlil, yeah, I think it may be Enlil.
Enlil-Enki, yeah.
Yes. So the idea there is I see these gods acting pretty human-like as far as all their struggles and squabbles. So I don't know where I stand on whether a lot of these gods are analogies for, certain states of being, like certain Jungian archetypes, or whether they're actual people that existed that bickered with each other, and we have a record of this bickering, and this all too human way of acting that these gods were engaged in, and they may have just fulfilled these certain archetypes instead of being the archetypes themselves, if that makes any sense. Like, I'm trying to see where exactly would you place a lot of these gods, as far as whether they're archetypes or whether they feel much more like real people whose history has just been infused with the archetypes over time?
Well, in terms of the connections, just to tie it to the Atlantis thing, just so other people know, there is like an archetypal element to, everything in human life. So that's something that I feel like people explain away a lot of things with, or get sucked into too much, where it's like, oh, here's this fire god, he's like a really buff dude, and then over here's this other fire god, he's like a really buff dude. So either you go on one pole, like clearly these guys were connected literally materially, or on the other side, oh well, it's just an archetype. But for the like pre-civilizational, prehistorical stuff, you can actually puncture through that, because there are some like etymological connections that can't be attributed to pure coincidence. That's part of what like took me a layer deeper in it. Like, long story short, if you're looking at like some really, really weird, deep aspect of astrology, and you're like, oh, the seventh dot over here in this corner of the chart, in Tibet it's called this, and in Arab cultures it's called this, that's like not a coincidence. And there's, a lot of compelling stuff there that can't be just said it's a, archetype or something, because it's like the literal terms. But that's what you just said with the archetypes. I think it goes both ways, man. I'm really like not so hard on one pole or the other. I do think like super physical beings exist and that they do interact with humans. I think a lot of them are probably like fallen angels and things like that because of my worldview. So I think a lot of them are real. A lot of them probably are archetypes. I think it goes both ways.
When it comes to this possible middle ground where it's not exactly one or the other, like, would there then be a stage at which something is closer to being an archetype because it's much more spectral and much less built up of physical matter, and then the lower down you go, the more nuanced things get, I guess? I don't know.
Mimesis in it, then. Yeah.
Well, what I mean exactly by that is like, I think that you get both ends of the spectrum in full. Like, for example, if you were making a being that represented war, of course you're going to make him like a buff, angry dude. That just makes sense, right? And of course there's going to be stories about him like conquering stuff, right? So on the one end you get the full archetype thing, but on the other hand, I do think there are like fallen angels. I mean, I'm kind of like avoiding the word demons basically, who appeal to humans and, rope them into things. And then it gets more complicated because, if humans are reaching out into like the darkness for something, one of these supernatural beings, in my opinion, can sort of like take that form because it's seductive for them and interact with them. So I wouldn't say it's like a mixed 50-50. It's more like you get both poles. That's just my opinion. You get both poles in full.
Would you also leave room for the possibility that, and again, I don't want to, like we were talking last time, I don't want to draw like a concrete bridge between these two different faiths, because you've had a lot of experience going into one and into the other. But when it comes to this desire to participate in life, it seems like we do end up embodying certain archetypes and playing them out, while with something like starting from Judaism, back in the day with the Torah or the Old Testament, that seemed to be a big break from let's live out this adventure tale let's live out these archetypes, let's live out this play, this cosmic never-ending circle, and just fulfill our dharma this way. There it seemed to be a bit of a break, and it's like, wait a minute, hold on, now you want us to do these sacrifices for this one god, and then start focusing, at least like in the results that we've seen, the focus did become much more on morality, much more on do unto others as you would have done unto you, instead of playing this game, fulfilling these archetypes. So it seems like with both, well, not both, like you could say Islam is also part of this, with these new Abrahamic religions that started up, the focus seemed to not be so much on the continuation of time, but now going out of that continuation and going to some other level. Would you agree that that was the what I'm saying makes sense as far as the ending of that cycle and going into something else from those religions?
It's interesting. Well, yeah, in a way. Well, because of my worldview, I do inherently set the Abrahamic faiths apart. I mean, because I'm Christian, so that naturally puts the scriptures in a privileged position just because of my worldview. So yeah, I mean, I do think there is a break there, and that it is like quote unquote like different. I think you could kind of make the case both ways. I mean, you do get like animal sacrifice in other religions, but I think there are like these big clean breaks like you're describing where like time is totally cyclical versus no, actually we're on like a roller coaster from point A to point B. I think you can pick out some like clean breaks, and that's part of like the development of the whole, story of the human spirit in a way. Yeah.
But then when we end up looking at, let's say, other planets, I understand your point about aliens and these DMT creatures being demonic, but at the same time, would you leave room for, let's say, something that Israeli former space engineer was talking about, how we've made this deal with this galactic federation, but the planet Earth is not yet ready to join. We don't even know what space is, and there's a lot of things that we have to get ready for. So in a way, like, would you leave what was wrong with me? Would you leave room for there being these other civilizations that are like us? Like, I'm not talking about like horned green men. I'm talking about just like human beings living on other planets, maybe taller, maybe as tall as the Nephilim were, but just with the entire scope of the galaxy and other galaxies around us. It's just, do you leave some room for there being other creatures out there like us out there?
Well, it's an interesting question. In a sense, I mean, I am sort of open to anything. I mean, I wouldn't say I've ever closed any doors fully. Someone that was like Mormon DM'd me the other day, and they were like, dude, like, you should become Mormon. Like, what do you think? And I was like, well, I mean, I haven't totally closed the door. I don't see it happening, but like, the door's not shut 100%. So I feel like that way about anything. If someone came to me with any claim, I am open to it in a sense.
But what would be the other version though? Like, if it was just us, what would be the point of all these galaxies and star systems, just to fuck with us?
Well, what I was going to say is that it kind of ties into like, the whole psychedelics thing and all that other stuff, because I think that the main thing that kind of happens is that these like claims and ideas, they always are put into a larger worldview and interpreted within a larger worldview, even though they don't seem like it. So even just the idea of like, yeah, there's this other, like Galactic Federation out there, and they're like kind of grooming humans to like get ready,
Grooming.
It's like, yeah,
Yeah, the
basically, that's
Klingons are
basically
there,
what it is.
Q is there.
Yeah. Well, my point is that it always has to be put in terms of a larger like cosmology and how that like plays out in terms of like religious posits or philosophy or metaphysics and things like that. So I would be open to it, but I'm like deeply, deeply, deeply skeptical. I would say a healthy level of skeptical. Some people would probably say overly skeptical. As for wait, what was the last? You ended at an interesting question. You said, "Oh yeah, what would the point be?" Well, that's kind of the thing. Is like that's kind of the perfect illustration of what I'm saying. If you're saying like, well, what's the point of the whole universe if humans are just here? That statement itself contains like an entire worldview. You could just as easily phrase it the opposite way and say, well, yeah, the universe is made for humans, so we're the only ones here. It's not like the evidence inherently points to one way or the other. The evidence is interpreted in terms of a worldview. So for me, I mean, it wouldn't be confusing at all, honestly, if humans are the highest living physical creatures in the galaxy, because to me, that kind of makes sense. God had to make some creatures that were, the highest terrestrial physical creatures, and we're it. And we look around and we're like, yeah, we're the closest, we're like what's in between angel and animal. There's human. So for me, it makes sense, but that's my worldview.
I doubt that we would be the highest in terms of what we're currently capable of. Like, even when I take a look at the human form right now, we seem to be fallen, as it were, from what we potentially could be. As far as, like, if we are talking about these metaphysical systems of the body, like the third eye, Kundalini, all this stuff, there seems to be a lot of things inherent in our system that we don't know how to use. And it's an interesting thing for me to think about, where it's hard for me to assume that we would have these things in us just for us to ignore them and not do anything with them. You know what I mean? It's like having an arm and just deciding not to use the left arm, just letting it hang all this time, even though you were born with it. You know what I mean? Like, that leads me to believe that there may have been a time before when people were able to, just like even the idea of the Satya Yuga. What does Satya mean? Truth. So I imagine that a Satya Yuga, as it were, would be one where people would be able to speak to each other without necessarily raising their vocal cords, where they would be able to telepathically communicate. So I don't know. The whole point of me saying all this is, when we're talking about us being a fallen species, biblically speaking, I wonder if there are also examples of this fallenness being one of us losing certain special abilities we used to have. And I agree with you, actually, Owen, that when you're talking about human beings potentially being it, I could see that, but I wouldn't necessarily say that this is the only place, just because my analogy, and you could be right too, but my analogy would be us living on this planet. How different would it be from some natives living on an island somewhere thinking this is the world, or for some civilization in Mesopotamia proclaiming their king to be king of the world, even though their only world is the world that's around them?
Yeah. I mean, you could say it cuts both ways. Yeah. But well, for the super physical ability stuff, I mean, that's why I feel like I don't really fit into any camp of people, really, because I definitely think that stuff is real. I definitely think, telepathy, let's just take that as an example. I definitely think telepathy and like super physical ways of knowing are like 100% real, for sure. I mean, to me, that's like kind of obvious. And I definitely think human beings exist in a fallen state. But again, it's normally like the ... or what comes after that, or the worldview it's packaged in, that makes me sort of want to start to unpack things more. Like, I definitely think telepathy is real, for example. I also obviously think human beings exist in a fallen state. I mean, we can just because if I were to say even that human beings are the highest terrestrial creatures, let's say, in a certain way, I mean, that wouldn't even imply like a state of perfection. Anyone can enhance their musical ability, or their ability to perceive color, or their ability to do any number of things. You know what I mean? So of course that's the case, but then it's normally the ... or like what comes after, or like with a lot of those things, there's normally like an implication of like, yeah, so there's all these things that humans can do that we can get better at, and you're like, yeah, and then the ... is, so we're going to ascend to this like hyperhuman state, and we're going to be these new creatures, and it's going to be a new age and a new era, and everything's going to be totally different, and so there's always like a package that comes along after that usually. So that's kind of
that's also like the cycle in Buddhism.
Owen, the age of Aquarius is upon us all the time.
Dude, it's all new age. Everyone's crypto new age now. That's the slogan, man.
But that is the same thing like in that cycle of Buddhism, where you would go from, the state that you're into, like the gods and the jealous gods, then, human, animal, and then back up and back down, and back up and back down. So I see what you're like.
Depends what form of Buddhism you're talking about, though, love. Yeah.
But like in that environment, I could definitely see where Owen is coming from, that like, yes, we can get all these various powers and entertain ourselves, and that comes to what I talked about before in the show, where if we were to have the ability to do anything you want, like Alexandra, if you had the ability to do anything you want, no limitations whatsoever, what would you do?
Remake the world. Just scrap it, remake it.
But how do you know how to do it properly, though? Leave. Like, what's the experience that you have in order to remake the world properly? Like, what would you do? How would you remake it?
Probably not even so much properly, but just in my image and in the way that I want it to work.
And how do you want it to work? Do you have any ideas you could share with us now on how you want
It'd
the
be something
world
I
to work?
figure out as I went along, I'm sure. But I just think it would be really fun to make if you were omnipotent and omnipotent, and you were like, all right, well, I want to, construct the galaxies. I want to do all that shit. It's like, yeah, hell yeah. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, but what about all the people that are going to experience a lot of pain from any mistakes you happen to make along the way if you're just
I'll
winging
make
it?
mistakes. If I can do anything, I'll just correct my mistakes.
But isn't the whole... Okay, see, Owen, I think I
it
get what
seems-
you're...
No, it seems there's a lot of one thing Owen said about everything is new age nowadays. It seems that even
This says God has a plan.
yeah,
Pretty
exactly.
assumptive.
But the thing is, it seems like even unexpected places have like a new agey vibe. Like even like, I mean, you can't find philosophy in philosophy departments in North America. You have to go to literary departments. But even like in philosophy now, the cutting edge, you have like object orientated stuff, which is like basically metaphysics for materialists that don't want to believe in God. And it seems like there's this underlying current, like with accelerationism and everything, that it almost like goes to a new age in the sense of there is another world that even right back in the 70s, that was this feminist author that wrote the book This World We Must Leave. Then there was even critical race theory people like Sun Ra, the jazz musician, who wrote about how there's this other world of liberation that is, and the Saturnites told him about this. And there's really fascinating work in like outsider art, academic philosophy, and the New Age movement. It seems like we're all trying to grasp this, not just a utopia, because I think the term utopia is like overplayed. It's something else. It's something different.
Oh, by the way, $5 from Byzantium Archon asking Alexandra if you're wearing pajamas.
Yes, I am.
Are these pajamas?
Oh my
These
god.
are pajamas
Lev.
because guess what? My roommate has COVID, so none of us can fucking leave our room. None of us can go anywhere.
Oh.
We are locked the fuck down. So yeah, pajamas today.
It's similar.
Nice.
It's the trad the Wojak. it's similar to that.
I thought it was me. Hold on, Alexandra, you've got the Discord notifications on. Please turn them off.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did that last time too. I'm really
I thought it was me. I was not sure. There we go. Now we know. Now we know. There should be just like a big button to turn them off automatically for everyone. I don't know why they have them on.
Yeah, you could.
Anyway.
I think you can mute all of them.
Yeah.
But anyways, it seems like that goes to what we were talking about before in terms of Baudrillard's take that America doesn't have an underlying mythos. It does. I mean, there's a debate, but it seems that now that in a position in terms of America being the harbinger of modernity and now hyper-modernity, it seems that everyone wants to create a mythos or sort of a new agey, and the way they can do it through abstractions or so forth or through academic jargon. But it seems that underlying impulse is still there. Like again, the New Age movement itself almost wouldn't have existed without this experience of radical detachment that America is from the rest of the world, geographically and in terms of some higher spiritual ancestral context. But then again, maybe Baudrillard's just being like totally terminally postmodern and saying that America doesn't have any underlying mythology. It does, but I can see his point. The mythology of America is something very much created by Americana itself rather than the bricolage of like thousands of years of history. But then there's some people that say that America is much more ancient, but that's like, very esoteric people on Twitter say that.
Well, that goes back to America being more ancient, that thing I said about America being the representation of these antediluvian Atlantean civilizations, where there may have been a similar, and again, who knows, but there may have been a similar structure that may have led to their downfall, where, like Alexandra was saying, if she were to be the chief entity of the world, she would make the world in her image and, let whoever perishes in the wake be, a necessary sacrifice for the greater fun, as it were. So imagine if Alexandra, if you were living in Atlantis at the time, and you had these psychic abilities, and you had the ability to like take a poor animal and just like combine this animal with something else. You know, like if you had the
Chimera?
ability to, yeah, or like take a lioness for example, and you had the ability to inflate a lioness to a giant size and then play basketball with the lioness. You know, like do all kinds of things that would be considered to be abominations today. So I think, Owen, you may agree with me on this, that when human imagination goes awry without there being any grounding, then
Well,
something
also,
would happen like,
in this context, if I'm omnipotent and if I can remake the world, I'm not human anymore. So
okay,
again,
okay, not
anything I
omnipotent,
do-
not
nothing I
omnipotent,
can
let's
do
take
is
it back.
considered a
No,
mistake.
let's take it back. You're an Atlantean. You're not omnipotent, but you're not
Okay.
omnipotent. But you know, you've got what it takes to create human-animal hybrids and other things utilizing telepathy and things like that. So I don't know, like, Owen, where would you place that desire to create, because you create art as well, but would you place that desire to create as being something that requires some kind of a mediation without necessarily giving up this feeling of, you know, wanting to create? Because we all have it, like I said in our earlier podcast. You have it, I have it, Geo has it, you know, we all, Alexander has it, this want to make something, not just sit down and pray all day. Like, where would you see a good balance here? Or do you think eventually, in order for all of us to get to the next level, we would have to just give up any desire we have to create things of that sort?
That's interesting, man. Well, like what Gio was saying, I guess Gio was really kind of recapitulating like what he thought I was saying, which was accurate. Like I really do feel like the substructure of most views floating around is new age, basically, and that's relevant to what you're asking me, because I feel like in the like once you see it, you really can't unsee it. In like the subtext of what everyone's saying, everyone from like, you can go to the 1900s like Aleister Crowley Golden Dawn style, or you can go to this weird religious group or this weird religious group, or even the materialists like he was saying, or even political stuff, even like, you know, communist stuff, or like anything. It's all over. The fundamental premise is like, hey, the old system, not only is it not working, but it's falling away, and this new system is like right about to hit, and you just so happen to be right on the cusp of it. So get ready, because once this new system hits, games changed. Everything's going to be totally different. It's going to be totally different, man. And I feel like once you notice that, you really can't unsee it. So even in the question you're asking me, you're like, you know, to get to the next level, doesn't that X, Y, and Z? But that question presupposes that there's like this new, like, get ready for the next level.
Hold on a second. Hold on
Yeah.
a second, though. You're talking about next level in New Age terms. Well, what about the New Jerusalem? What's more next level than that?
Yeah, no, true. Yeah, no. Well, there is an imminent, you know, sense of that. You could even say that there's a sense of that within Christianity, but I guess what makes it different.
Well, that was going on back in the day, like during the Roman Empire. They were thinking that the end of the world is going to be upon them any day. So, like, what's the difference between that and New Age as far as wanting an imminence to occur?
For sure. I would say the difference and what characterizes it is this sense of transcending former limitations and things like that. Like if you talk to a Christian who is like even the most, you know, let's say crazy, who's like, yo, Jesus is coming tomorrow, the apocalypse is going to happen. That's like a fulfillment of the state and way things are now. But what I would say is characteristic of the New Age thing in general, you know, again, in the widest possible sense, is the idea that this new system will detach us from like the confines of the old system. And the thing is that, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a long walk from what you asked me, but not really. Like
no, it's totally related.
A lot of those limitations, and I would say this goes across the board, those limitations like actually exist. So trying to transcend them in a certain way just doesn't work and is like a fool's errand, basically. It's like Satan rebelling against God, basically. You know, you can try, but ultimately at the end of the day, you're just like a fallen angel and he's God. So I feel like that's kind of what characterizes it in a way. It ties in with the whole psychedelics thing also, because, you know, a lot of what I see is sort of a recapitulation of Timothy Learyism. Timothy Leary being like, yo, once we get everyone to take acid, it's going to be, again, I'm not going to repeat myself, but it's going to be totally different. Yes. Everyone's going to be on acid. And now that didn't work. Baby boomers happened, hippies happened, it didn't work. And now it's like basically the same thing with DMT. I mean, no one ever says this because they know it's irresponsible, but the subtext is like, dude, DMT, once we get people on it, it's going to be totally different. Games change, you know.
It reminds me of this Russell Brand clip. I don't mean to subtweet, but well, I do because I find him insufferable. But he said, like, you know, if Mark Zuckerberg just took DMT, he'd realize it's like all the CEOs in the world should just take DMT and they will realize that they are one with all of existence and they will stop selling your data to corporations and censoring you and destroying the ecosystem.
Instead, they're microdosing, trying to figure out how to create even more.
Well, the microdosing thing is interesting
spying
because
on you.
That is directly like neoliberal, like capitalist realism, basically like taking a tool of supposed liberation and totally recapitulating it into this mutilated form of like productivity. And it's like this productivity culture around like Silicon Valley, which I wanted to write something for the blog Covidian Aesthetics about like how microdosing is, again, another like utopian notion that was reappropriated by capitalist realism and like totally just like skull fucked every idea that the hippies had. And it's just it's such an own. But anyways, that's...
and Alexandra, you've experienced not LSD, although you may have, but recently you had...
a 6-part treatment, ketamine infusions. So, yeah, what?
No, go on.
Oh, yeah. So I don't know if I would categorize it as a psychedelic experience. It was certainly, it's an anesthetic, it's disassociative. And it's meant, like, the whole process is meant to sort of repair parts of your brain, specifically the neocortex that where parts of it has been damaged due to like chronic stress. And I will say that it worked really, really, really well for me, better than any other kind of treatment I've gotten, you know, as an adult. But yeah, I think like it's like one of those things where like, you know, there's sort of a shift towards from thinking about like certain sorts of substances like, you know, party drugs are harmful or things that need to be kept away from people versus, you know, using them for their medicinal values. And, you know, because again, like there's a lot of like substances that can be like abused. Alcohol, you know, for instance, like people are generally, at least in America, are sort of given the choice of, you know, whether or not they want to consume alcohol and whatever amounts they want to consume it. You know, there's not as much regulation as alcohol as there is for like marijuana or ketamine and things like that. And yeah, it's a lot of it is just cultural and yeah. Well, but yeah, ketamine was just really good at getting me to sort of detach from my past. Like before I got the treatments, I very much felt like the things that had happened to me, sort of the traumas I experienced, and, you know, sort of the things that I didn't want to be part of my reality, like I couldn't escape them. Now it's like, okay, you know, I can, like, I felt like the sort of the rational and emotional like parts of my brain has been recalibrated, another greater balance.
It's a very interesting thing. I mean,
yeah, my thinking is much more clear. I feel like I have a lot more confidence. I'm less neurotic.
I mean, on one hand, I can understand how something like that would be able to definitely help you, and apparently it definitely did. But my bigger question here is more about the human test, more about the test of will when it comes to confronting the worst things. And again, it's like, obviously, if somebody has a condition where it's just there's something physically wrong with their brain, like there's just some problem with the synapses, then
everybody has like various degrees, you know, like sort of 5-factor model of human personality, and neuroticism. Your neuroticism quotient will vary, you know, like, you know, from person to person, and also from, you know, where you are in life. Like older people tend to be more neurotic, than younger people.
But when you say neurotic, this is still
neurotic
you
is
can't
like,
really measure that. It's
yeah,
not
you
really
can
something.
measure neuroticism.
How do you measure neuroticism?
Self-consciousness. Neuroticism is sort of like obsessiveness. And neuroticism is basically like if you feel constrained, in some way by like, the things that you fear.
Yeah, but that's a feeling. It's not really something you can measure. Like I can measure how much vitamin B12 I have by taking blood tests.
It's not like you can't take like a blood serum sample and but there's certain hormones that happen. There's certain like parts of the brain that are more activated in a more neurotic person.
Well, they're saying the chat is saying that Alexandria is definitely neurotic. So
hey, why would you say that?
No, they mean it. They mean it nicely. They mean it in a nice way.
I don't know. The reason why I'm asking these questions, Alexandra, is that I am curious whether there are physiological things in the brain that you can see like a before picture and an after picture after taking these treatments.
Yes, you can. They've posterized on my doctor's office, but there's neurodendrite growth that occurs post-treatment.
Well, they say that ketamine.
Cortex.
Don't they say that it's more of like an in utero type of dissociative drug? It's not like a psychedelic. It's you're entering like a cosmic womb. Like there's a lot. That's
a pretty apt metaphor because it did feel like okay. So like I had my doses titrated. So like I started off with a low dose and I went up. The most I actually like felt it was my second to last treatment. Put me on like 70 milligrams or something and like a bunch of magnesium they put in the IV drip. Oh, so nice. And just it sort of took me to a place where I felt like I was underwater, but it wasn't water. It was more like this sort of silky aether. And the problem is that they put you in this fucking ugly ass room. It's like you're going to the dentist or something, and you like lean back on this chair that's got all kinds of fucking holes in it. They patched it up with tape. The walls are bare. Everything's bare. Yeah, I had like my phone and some headphones, and I listened to like the Euphoria sound. Euphoria on HBO. I used to listen to that the soundtrack of that, and just
not that show. Oh my god.
Yeah, they don't have any plants. They don't have anybody in there to talk to you.
That sucks.
It really,
Let me inform you that the chat is now saying the chat likes you. They say that you're a quirked up shoddy, so that's pretty good.
Oh my god, quirked up?
Yes, you're very quirked up. So, but
you're actually getting people who are coming to your defense, who are saying that you are not neurotic. Thank you very much, Peter Faust, our great patron, who $50 patron, if you can believe that. So our $50 patron says that you are not neurotic and you're cool, and I agree with him. I think that you are a wonderful
the term
girl.
Quirked up shoddy. There you go.
Exactly.
So,
but I want to get to Owen when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So here's what I'm interested in finding out. I agree that there are definitely conditions where when you use a lot of these psychedelics, they do end up helping things and it is observable, like a before and an after. Mm-hmm. But I'm still concerned about like general use of it.
No, but Lev, like look at it this way. Look at before we get to Owen. Look at what Alexandria is saying. It seems that there's something about this very clinical, sterile, medical setting of taking I don't know. Ketamine's kind of a synthetic, so that's kind of a bad argument. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you're taking these entheogens that have a specific ritualistic context, and now they're sort of being administered, and there's this cloak around medicalization in terms of these substances, and it seems that in some ways it's very alien to me in some respects.
I agree, but I would throw away. I would even throw away the ritualistic aspects of it too, because here, Owen, I agree with you halfway when you're talking about this misuse of gaining certain strength, and you're making a connection to the New Age movement and also to the partaking of LSD and other psychedelics. I completely agree with you there. Where I disagree with you is, at least right now, I think that just like a comment was made before about wouldn't it be great if everybody went to the gym, and somebody was saying that kind of like ironically, but other people took it to, to heart, where, yeah, it would be good if everybody went to the gym, if they worked out, and people would be a lot healthier, less back pain. So when it comes to psychedelics, my concern is in not utilizing your willpower. And Alexandra, this is completely separate from what you were talking about, because what I'm talking about is more like somebody actually, what Gio was saying, using it for a spiritual purpose. I would actually be a little bit more against that, just because it seems to be that if we have certain limitations, we should, maybe we don't have to, but if we want to, then we should work our own willpower to overcome those limitations instead of taking a shortcut, instead of prying open the door prematurely through the use of psychedelics specifically give us enlightenment or something like that.
Well, you can't. I think enlightenment is subjective, anyways. And also,
well, you know what I mean, like getting us to certain higher realities, to see the DMT, see the elves, whatever you want, hang out with the mantis men, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, you can be a complete dumbass and like take psychedelics and have a psychedelic experience and like, get something out of it. Like, I think in general, like psychedelics are very easy to misuse. I think people have harmed themselves greatly. People have killed themselves while on a trip. I think it's just like either like, you either get a benefit. You either get a benefit.
No, but we're past that. We're past that. No, here's the thing. Forget all that. We're agreeing on that. We're agreeing on that. But let's get past that. What I'm interested in is not that. I agree with you 100%, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the actual level of saying, yes, I took DMT, I took LSD, and it was an amazing experience that gave me all this insight. This is what I'm talking about. And the reason why I'm talking about this goes back to willpower, goes back to like, if you have a certain amount of time on this planet, if you're not utilizing your own resources in order to gain some kind of, higher understanding of what's going on, if you're using an external substance to do it for you, like a crutch, then I think it's kind of a waste. It's like having a sandwich with butter on it, and instead of eating both like the bread and the butter, you just like lick the butter off, and what you have left with is a butterless piece of bread.
What is this metaphor?
Come on.
What the hell is this?
No, it's a perfect metaphor, because basically what it is you've pried open access to things that you didn't train your willpower to access to begin with, and now you're spending the rest of your life eating.
It's like if you just ate the middle part of a Pop-Tart, you have to work for the fucking filling.
Exactly. But I don't know, Owen, do you see where I'm?
Yeah, no, I get. I totally get what you're saying. Well, there's a lot of things there. I mean that. There's just covered a lot of ground. So the thing is, the medical aspect of it, just since it got brought up, I wouldn't really say I don't have like a problem with that. It's kind of like, whenever you bring up, like, as a lower example, like if you bring up weed or something, or like medical, or like, legalizing weed, for example, people are always like, oh, but what about those kids? Little kids have epilepsy and they give them weed pills and the epilepsy goes away. You're like, okay, yeah, that's totally different. So there is like a medical aspect to it that I feel like is often used as like a red herring when you're talking about the spiritual aspects of it. Not that that's what you were doing. You were telling us a story about something that happened to you, which is actually really interesting. But for the other stuff, I think that, again, it's like zooming out and seeing the presuppositions of the question, because that asking me like, someone smokes DMT and they get to this place, wouldn't it be better for them to work there and get there on their own? The thing is, for me, I stopped seeing those states that you're on when you use psychedelics as the same thing as heightened spiritual states. I don't see them as inherently the same thing. Like if my friend comes to me and he's like, hey, I smoked DMT and I catapulted out, like you were saying, to this like office waiting room where all these praying mantises were like cutting into my body and stuff, I wouldn't say like, well, that's cool, but I'm going to meditate and get there myself the natural way. You know what I mean? So yeah, for me, I don't even really see them as like connected necessarily. I mean, if I had to pinpoint my whole angle on the whole thing, really, It's that I don't really think that psychedelics as a spiritual path, as a tool of spiritual insight, I don't really think it plays out, which is like an ambiguous term, but I don't think it really is a tenable spiritual path. I think it kind of collapses under like scrutiny, basically. I could go on about it, but that's basically my general posit.
But then if we're talking about even something like going back to creation, going back to drawing all these various things that all of us like to draw, that you like to draw, I like to draw, Hieronymus Bach likes to draw, this is still to me a neighbor to the DMT realm. And it is a neighbor to the DMT realm in that it is something that we naturally can see when we use our imagination. We create these monsters, we create these entities. I mean, I just had a dream last night where I was in this Japanese toy store, and there were these Pokemon figures on the wall, and I wanted to grab this giant, like a Sentai. You remember Super Sentai? It's like the Japanese Power Rangers. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Okay, I'll send you a link afterwards. But anyway, I wanted to grab the robot. I ended up stepping on a toy soldier, like a green toy soldier. The head crushed, and it turned into this green crystal glass. I tried sweeping it with my arm, and then my arm just got full of this green crystal glass that I had to take off. You know. So the reason why I'm saying this, Owen, is that I like imagining things. I like going into these realms of imagination. I don't see that as being sinful. I don't see that as being something to ignore, because I think we're all interested in it. And unless we're saying, okay, we're going to forget about all this and just focus on God, there's always going to be this aspect of us that would enjoy this back and forth with this daimonic realm. Now, you could make the point that, hey, this is just from our imagination. It has nothing to do at all with these demons and, mantis men, all that. Maybe, and at that point, it's like, whatever, I'm not going to see them anyway because I'm not going to do DMT. But in the case that these things are connected, that these things are part of our whole, like, noosphere, imagination, whatever you want to call it, then I wouldn't necessarily say that I would give up, the potential of expressing myself through art by interacting in those spheres as well.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see them as directly related. Like for me, if like let's say like if the DMT space is being like introduced into a conversation about these topics, it's like that sort of would need to be pinned down a little bit based on what that experience is and like what those entities are for us to even talk about that. Like what I mean is that, so you brought up dreams and stuff like that, right? Most people, some people don't, but let's say most normal people who never think about this stuff, if they have a dream and they see an entity in their dream and then they wake up, most people, whether it's true or not, think, okay, that was part of my dream. My brain made that up while I was sleeping. And then they interpret the experience through that lens. So like you're saying, if you like here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, just to make it like concrete. I went to a peyote ceremony once, and I was talking to this woman, and she's like, last time I was here on peyote, I looked into the fire and I saw my brother there in the fire. He died, my dead brother, in the fire, and he was talking to me, and it was crazy. So most people would just take that experience and say, wow, that's crazy, and kind of like draw spiritual meaning from it. But what you think that actually is and how it fits into a larger worldview determines how you take meaning from that experience. So if you're like, that was literally my brother in the fire, he actually was real talking to me, then all of a sudden your cosmology is rewired to be like, well, I guess dead people are just hanging out waiting for us to take peyote, and then what he said is going to have like a certain significance. Or if you're like, well, that was just an illusion, that was just my mind producing crazy shit, then you're going to interpret it in a totally different way. Or maybe someone like me is going to say, hey, that wasn't really your brother, that was probably like a demon or something, like trying to fuck with you, like, sorry. Then you're going to interpret that in a totally different way. So it's like, once you introduce like the DMT space, let's say, into the conversation, it totally depends on what you think it is, how it functions. If it is just a total hallucination and you're just making it all up in your brain, then yeah, it is kind of like sitting in the corner of your room and imagining weird stuff, I guess, in a way. But if they actually have some like ontological reality, these like weird beings and realms people go to, and it's not just a pure hallucination, then it's totally different. So it just depends on how it fits into your worldview, basically.
There is another level we can go here, though, and I know that right now it's almost 6 o'clock, but I would be interested in leaving you with the following thought, that when it comes to whether it's A, B, or C, if we were talking about a body of water where, you know, like you would think maybe under this water there would be some treasure, and I would say, no, I don't think so. Well, the only way for us to know is to go down and check it out. Or if we're talking about any kind of objective reality, there would be certain, let's say, levels that we would have to reach in order to understand something. You know, that's why when we're children, there are certain things we don't understand. When we grow older, hopefully, we do understand the way that certain things work, objectively speaking. And why I'm bringing this up is my only concern is that a lot of times when people talk about these various experiences that they've had, a lot of times they're talking about them while they're in they've experienced them while they were in an inebriated state, whether it's taking peyote or whether it's taking any kind of psychedelic. And my concern here is that, yes, I don't think there would be any way for you to actually know, like somebody, like let's say an adult, would be able to figure out certain things related to the objective world. I don't think there would be a proper way for you to really know if the only experience that you've had is under a psychedelic state, taking some drug, as opposed to maybe, and this is the last thing that I would leave for you here to consider possibly, that maybe part of us existing in this world is also to grow in terms of our perception, not taking something and then thinking, oh, is this A, B, or C, but being able to actually perceive something and recognizing something as the truth, which maybe we have a certain inherent limitation that it's not possible to experience, but maybe it is. Maybe it is possible at a certain state to actually know this is what's going on in this higher reality. And like I said before, I don't think it'll ever be possible to achieve that state with psychedelics. I think the only way would be to grow, and I think that we do have like high potential to grow beyond what we currently do. Because let's face it, most of us, what do we do all day? Like we don't really engage in things like that at all, or really most people don't work on themselves.
But I think the problem is, Lev, I don't know. It always seems to be the debate that goes back and forth between the efficacy of psychedelics on a personal level or whether it does connote a certain spiritual practice. But at the end of the day, I feel that a lot of what we talk about in terms of these plants and these shamanic cultures is that the forces of, let's call it, colonialism, globalization, late capital, hypermodernity, it seems that the problem with a lot of these like new agers, especially nowadays, is that they talk about these issues, but yet when it comes to the appropriation of these plant medicines, it's like the power that they have derooted from their original context within these cultures. It seems that they just totally ignore it because it's like they want to like bomb acid or, go to the Amazon basin and do ayahuasca. So it's like all of the stuff that they critique that suddenly gets bracketed. And it's like, no, now we can have a connection to the real tradition when we do it, even though we're Westerners that like have, we're largely like white hipsters that go to the Amazon that can afford to go there.
But either way, we're not really working on ourselves. We're allowing something else to work for us.
But again, and that's the other issue I think that Owen as well brought up, is that we're allowing things into ourselves that we don't have a traditional context or a experience with. And so that sort of like goes to the question, if you're taking the metaphysics of it seriously, that begs the question of, are you letting these strange entities in when you don't have, and of course the New Agers, they get around this question by saying that we're one global consciousness and there's no separation between people and between the races.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't get fucked by these things, like
that's
even
what I mean,
global
that's
consciousness.
what I mean, right?
Yeah, also I know I said I had to leave at 6, but I can hang for a minute. I'll have to bounce like eventually, but I can hang for a minute. Right. But yeah, what I was saying, so just to make like everything you guys are saying is true, but what I meant specifically by like it not fitting into a larger cohesive framework is like I've been to, and people talk about this kind of stuff all the time, but I've been around people it's actually happened to. You go to like an ayahuasca retreat or something, let's say, and someone says, I'll just make up an extreme example. Someone says, wow, while I was tripping, I saw Buddha, and Buddha came to me and told me all this stuff. Wow, that's crazy. And then sitting next to them, someone will be like, yeah, while I was tripping, I saw Ganesh, And that was crazy. And then let's just say the next person sitting next to them is like, yeah, when I was tripping, I saw Jesus standing there. It was crazy, And most people just take that at face value. But the thing is that you can't integrate that data at face value because those gods represent oppositional systems. So
But you're still talking about people tripping. You're still talking about children. If you were to use my analogy here between children and adults, so you're talking about children having childish experiences relative to, let's say, if this is possible, somebody who would go the natural route and then be able to, just through their own personal growth,
Yeah, but what if you
understand...
go through those extreme forms of meditation, like Owen is saying, and then someone may see Christ, other ones may see Indra?
Well, Owen was talking about examples of people tripping out. There is, but at the same time, it's like, if it's something that has some other component from the external world that's utilized to achieve this vision, this is very sus to me, and why I'm saying, like, at least I'm going to leave room for the possibility that beyond quitting this idea of pursuing higher knowledge altogether, there may be an actual point to trying to pursue this higher knowledge, or whatever you want to call it, through sober means, through the means of working on your own mind.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, that's what I'm about for sure. I definitely think pursuing higher knowledge is valid. Yeah, you could say that I reject that like psychedelics are like a viable way of pursuing like spiritual knowledge, basically. Yeah.
And I agree with you. We are in agreement there. The only thing that we are in disagreement about right now, Owen, and
well,
who knows, I may change my mind.
I wouldn't close the door. But I mean, I'm very harsh on psychedelic culture. But it's a surprise. I would say I wouldn't close the door on that.
Well, okay, I personally would close the door right now, for myself at least. But what I'm saying is that the disagreement, I think, between me and Owen just has to do with this, let's say, mid-realm, or whatever you want to call it, of having these very trippy, dream-like experiences in the astral plane where you end up, meeting Mantis Man and be like, hey, Mantis Man, what's up? And he's like, hey, Lev. That would be fun to me, Owen. Like, I'm not going to hurt anybody, and I'm not going to hurt myself through the process of taking drugs to achieve that. So that's all I'm saying.
We'll bring this up in the psychedelic stream, but before Owen has to leave, I wanted desperately, because we didn't get to this, and I know this is personal, but Owen, give us your Saul road to Damascus. You didn't go beheading Christians, obviously, but what were the stages, or was it a single moment, or was it in stages? What made you turn back to the path of Christianity, as apart from your explorations in Buddhism, in particular Vedanta, so forth? What made you convert back to? I know you didn't have a religious upbringing, but let's just say in terms of culture, like America, like I don't know are you an Orthodox Christian, or?
I don't belong to any particular group.
Non-denominational. Yeah.
I jokingly describe myself as like reluctantly non-denominational. People know like the non-denominational churches where they're like, yeah, we're non-denominational. Where I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, I haven't like signed up for anything yet. But yeah, I mean, well, yeah, it's a really good question. I wouldn't really say it was like converting back to. I know you qualified as like, cultural and stuff, but I really do feel like in the realm I grew up in, like the idea of like becoming Christian would have been literally like the most insane thing possible. I mean, more so than like getting like a third arm attached to your face or something. Like it really couldn't have been less my like cultural context, which is probably why I never considered it. But I guess in a nutshell, the arc would be that I got really into religion alongside studying art. It wasn't really initially paired with the art. I think it was that when I first went away, like to college, this was like a long time ago, obviously, but just to put it in a nutshell, I got like really depressed and I intuitively wanted to read like really old books. I think it was a reaction against like the modern art and stuff around me. I was like, there must be something with this old stuff, like kind of a really stupid, but also intelligent moment of like, yeah, why do people keep all these old books around? Like what's in them? Like, what's the deal? And when I read the Tao Te Ching, that was when I had this moment of, one of my first like quote unquote, like red pills, you could say, where I realized like all around me, I've been told that religion is stupid, but this book is crazy smart. So obviously something has been kept from me. And it started an arc of me reading all the religious texts I could find, just like trying to really just shopping the buffet of like, what's this, putting on all the different glasses. I think another big turning point was when I read a book called Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. And long story short, at that moment, I really liked drugs. I really liked religion and I really liked art. And when I read that book, it's like he was telling me, hey, all those different things you like, they're actually integrated in one thing that is
That was my
the
experience
visionary.
reading as well.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, I actually
I was
all
like
my
14 years old.
yeah, nice. Yeah, so I was like, oh, all my interests are cohesive. Like, it's not a coincidence that I really like these Eastern religious texts and doing acid and painting. Like, this is all part of one thing. Like, wow. And that was really my, MO, my like modus operandi for a long time. Just focusing on the turning point so I don't get rambly. I got really into the Eastern stuff for a variety of reasons. It goes well with being like a nerdy white guy who's really into psychedelics. We kind of talked about that last time.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the big changes after that would be, so I was really into Tibetan Buddhism and doing psychedelics and all that stuff, and into like shamanism in a way. Also, I went to some quote unquote Native American stuff, but it's more like a scholastic background and like glue for holding together like what connects me doing acid in my room and me going to this Tibetan Buddhist temple, like this vaguely Neoplatonic, like shamanic worldview that I'm like cobbling together. And along the way up until this point, I had done a ton of psychedelics. Like, I mean, I don't want to like flex. There's some interesting stories along the way, but I've done like all the psychedelics people have heard of and some that people haven't. So I was really, really into it. And I guess the turning points were when I got really far down into Tibetan Buddhism, I hit this wall of like, well, am I going to learn Tibetan? Am I going to like basically become Tibetan? And I realized that because Buddhism is made for those cultures it travels to and it takes those forms, it was kind of like imagining, someone who's Mongolian trying to get to a point where they could casually understand things like, oh, Noah's Ark and Paul Bunyan and all these random cultural American metaphors. I was like, I'm never going to be so immersed in the Tibetan system that I'm going to just get this system that's made for Central Asian people. And I realized that what drew me to Tibetan Buddhism was that it was this hands-on religious experience. And I realized that I had that in my own backyard, that being Western occult. So I sort of had this epiphany moment where I was like, oh, I'm a Western person. I should be doing Western occult. Tibetan Buddhism is almost like Tibetan occult. If I'm using occult in like a neutral sense, not negative or positive, that's kind of like what it's like.
And I like how the dakinis look like pretty Tibetan ladies.
They do, the takinis. Yeah, they're kind of like, what are they, like snaky flying mermaids, kind of.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I got to that point and I poured it over to Western occult. And that's really like where I was for a long time, like shopping around Aleister Crowley world, also trying to go ancient and older. But the crux of the story, you asked me like how I like converted, is basically it was a combination of things. The main questions that I had weren't getting answered by the Eastern systems of, why does good and evil exist, which I do think absolute good and evil exists, obviously, and how did the universe get created? Like, what's the deal with making the universe? Those weren't getting addressed by the Eastern system. So eventually I kind of like broke up with them. They really are like my like ex-girlfriends. Like, I don't go out of my way to like talk shit about them, but I broke up with them like for a reason.
That's surprising because usually those are the two main questions that like Reddit fedora tippers, atheists use as justification to run away from Christianity, which is, what about good and evil, man? Like, it seems like, but those questions drove you towards Christianity, which is fascinating, especially in the modern context. But
yeah, well, it's really because of, I don't think we talked about the last time, but one of the biggest things ever, it stuck with me. Like, I think I read this like in high school and I just never forgot about it. But C.S. Lewis has this thought experiment in Mere Christianity where, to put it in one sentence, it's, if you took everyone who thought stealing was bad and killed them, so everyone on earth thinks stealing is good, would stealing be good? The answer is no. So that proves that stealing being bad isn't conditional on human beings. It's a super physical thing written into the universe, like gravity or something. And like, how do you explain that? And when I read that, it tripped me out so hard and I couldn't explain it. And
that would even contradict like deontology, like Kantian metaphysical moralism, like, because you give each other the moral law through reason. But then if everyone, but he was like, well, if everyone believed in stealing, then we couldn't have a world that exists where everyone believes in stealing because it like society wouldn't function. That I remember my philosophy prof was talking about that. Yeah,
well, that breaks down too, though, in my opinion, because you could easily imagine a world where every culture does female genital mutilation or something. I mean, that could happen, but then it would still be wrong. It would be wrong.
Maybe we do. Maybe there is something that we're doing that's really, really wrong, but we've just been culturally conditioned to believe that it's not.
Well, like I can name a few things, actually.
factory
Definitely, yeah.
farming, so many
But
deaths.
the fact that we can be culturally conditioned to do something and it's still wrong proves that it being wrong isn't conditional on the cultural conditioning, if that makes sense.
Well,
The
one
fact
thing,
that a culture can be wrong proves that there is something to be wrong about. So
Sure.
it is like a super physical thing.
or
Yeah.
look at that tribe where the boys give the blowjob to the older men, and that's supposed to be, you know what I'm talking about? Like
a lot
there
of
are-
cultures who
Yes.
come up with that.
They
That's
have,
Yes,
they
but
have.
this is like
popular.
specifically like about like transferring their manhood energy
Yeah,
into you, and you're supposed to become a man.
There are
then.
ones
So,
that
yeah.
stretch the genitalia. I remember Joseph Campbell was talking about.
Oh yeah,
rites of
no, on the
initiation.
Hawaiian Islands.
Mhm.
actually,
But it is
cultural
very
practice.
interesting though how a lot of these tribes, they do a lot of these very strange, kooky things. Yet it seems to me, Owen, that the more people go into this realm of more nuance and more thinking and more civilization, a lot of these questions I think do end up cropping up. Even with Zarathustra back in the day with Zoroastrianism, that was like the OG good versus evil mentality back in the day. And maybe we could even say that the Jews in the period of exile took some aspects of Zoroastrianism, maybe a lot of aspects of Zoroastrianism into there. But for me, like where I personally fall into a lot of this stuff is that I think that the more cultured people end up getting over time, then certain things, they come out through whichever way, and people can understand that there is a good and there is an evil, there is the right way to treat somebody and the wrong way to treat somebody. Me personally, if we are talking about culture here, I would be interested, and I was kind of inspired by this conversation that you just had right now with us, to start looking more into the Kabbalah. And I know I mentioned the Kabbalah before here and there, but I am interested just in the way that that works, because it also talks about good and evil, but it talks about it in the sense of giving and receiving, where it talks about the Creator being a force of all giving for the sake of giving, and how we
Ein Sof is
receive.
yeah, similar
and how
to
we
care in
we
some ways.
receive for the sake of receiving. And even when we show love for other people, there is still an aspect of us, just of our egotistical self, that gets pleasure from that, and
Did I
that
just
kind
say
of keeps
care?
us in that state.
So maybe I just said care. So maybe there could be some strange like Heideggerian Kabbalism going on.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Oh, and by the
Well-
way, what? Yeah.
No, I was gonna say it's funny you mentioned like the tribes and stuff like that, because that was also a big part of me sort of like getting a reality check, because I can't say like exactly under what conditions, but I was in a situation where I got to interact with people from some groups that let's just say some people would describe them as like primitive if they were being uncharitable. I wouldn't say that, but let's just say that was the case. And like I don't know if people know, but there really are like headhuntery tribes and like tribes that eat people out there and stuff.
Yep.
I mean, no offense, but like that actually does exist.
Yeah.
And when I was at the height of like my shamanism is cool, like quote unquote primitive people like really got it all figured out and magic is real and all this stuff, which magic is actually real. But the point is that I got to interact with some people from those groups. I won't say from where, but it was a tribe that basically like straight up used to like eat people and stuff like that. And they got converted to
Cannibal
Christianity.
Holocaust type
Well,
stuff.
they got converted to Christianity, and it was interesting because I met this older
they-
guy.
Yeah, I bet they really enjoy taking the host.
Well, it was interesting. 'Cause I didn't ask about that, but when I talked to this guy, he came and I was talking to him and I was like, "Hey, dude, like I said, they became Christian." And I was asking him about all this stuff, like the magic stuff and the older religion stuff and the black magic. And he was like, he was really negative about it. I thought I was in this perspective of like, oh yeah, this tribe, like they got converted to Christianity, but I bet it's just like cultural and they think it's whack and they want to go back to like the real old ways and stuff. But they really, the people I talked to really didn't. They were like, that stuff is like really fucked up and creepy and we left it behind like for a reason.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that speaks for everyone, obviously, and it definitely doesn't, but it did reality check me a little bit to be like, I have this rose colored lens on so hard. And
A lot of white people do. A lot of Western white
Yeah.
people do have this perception that like somehow like these ancient, these foreign tribes have been contaminated somehow, and that there's some
White
sort of,
savior
like,
complex,
Yeah.
yearning, to return to their cultural roots, and it's like
Well-
that,
well,
that's not necessarily the case.
But Alexander, you bring that up, and I wish that Dano Pinchbeck could come here, but
He will. He will.
On him next
He
time.
will.
But I was gonna bring up how the New Age movement has a lot of that. What Said, here's the thing: there's a lot of problems with Said's thesis about exoticism and Orientalism, but there is a sense of Orientalism and exoticism within the New Age movement in terms of like the white savior saying that the Christianity came along and like uprooted these tribes. And there's also like a far right wing version of that. But I tend not to get into those things because I have friends who are neo-pagans and Nordicists, and I know it's like a sticking point.
Well, Gio,
But-
you know, with my,
it's another thing I want to talk to you,
Yeah.
Owen. But I know you have to go. But what is your question? What is your opinion on the pagan versus Christian like thing? I don't know. I think we make more out of it than it is. I don't know. It's just I don't want to offend people that I know who are good people either way. So
The pagan versus Christian thing. Well, yeah, I'll let you guys know when I have to go. I'm just kind of chilling right now.
okay.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't really like go out of my way to like you're saying, like I don't really go out of my way to like be a dick, honestly. And
Yeah,
you know, that's why I'm kind of like qualifying what I'm saying. Like when I say like Buddhism, I usually qualify of like my perception of it because I know people who like study really hard and it's kind of like, you know, it's different for them versus like someone wandering into like, you know, Urban Outfitters and picking up like a book with like the Buddha on it and like a pink, you know, logo or something.
Yeah.
But the Christian pagan thing, I mean, it's not something I go out of my way to like jump into. I think that there is definitely like something very, very valid about being like, oh, you know, how did my people used to be and how did things used to be in the past? And maybe there's something cultural here where like the baby got thrown out with the bathwater and maybe there is something interesting or valid or aesthetic or deeper here or whatever. But if I got into more like of a theological debate about it, I think that for the most part, again, I'm not speaking about everyone, but usually it's funny because it's kind of like I was talking about the psychedelics and how it fits into a larger worldview. I feel like normally it's not part of like a larger cohesive cosmology in the sense that, you know, if your argument is like, I guess you could say I'm straw manning if you were being uncharitable to me. But if your argument is like, well, people should just be the pagan faiths that their ancestors used to be, you know, that's how it should be. A lot of those faiths don't add up to each other. So what are you saying? That someone who's Nordic should believe this and someone who's Jewish should be Jewish? Well, now those two systems don't go together. So which one's true? And when you ask them, they're usually like, oh, well, that's like an Abrahamic thing, like obsessing about like the universal truth or whatever. But at the end of the day, like something's either true or it's not. You know what I mean?
Well, there would be a pagan system where gods would be incorporated into the pantheon of another pagan tribe. But again, those tribes would have had something in common with those gods when we're talking about the antediluvian time, as far as whether these were actual, you know, Nephilim, big people who were, you know, much taller and smarter and, you know, like Super Saiyan level human beings
and
back in the day.
Martin K in the chat is mentioning the recent online Twitter war between Thomas777 and Varg Vickners, which I feel I had a tweet where it was the picture from obviously Varg would be Bruiser Brody against Ric Flair, because I don't know, Thomas kind of looks like Ric Flair to me, but
well, he's actually a good example. He's a good example. I feel like Varg is like too cool to notice like every random little thing I say, so I'll just use him as an example, even though I really don't like to talk shit about like particular people, and I'm really not talking shit. I'm just explicating an aspect of his worldview. But like I feel like when he goes into it, I don't know that much about him at all. I've literally probably seen like 30 tweets, so I don't know that much about him. But when he goes into it, he's like, oh yeah, the gods like are us. Like the gods are these metaphors for X, Y, and Z and stuff. So it's like at the end of the day, you're an aesthetic atheist. And usually I feel like the pagan thing is aesthetic. It's like, and I'm down because I'm such an aesthetic person, but I feel like you can't reason backwards from politics and aesthetics into what is the truth about metaphysics and things like that directly without at least acknowledging it.
I feel like a lot of the neo-pagans, they sort of are nominal atheists, and so, not a lot of them, but certainly I know Varg and some people on like 4chan are nominally atheistic in terms of the gods being metaphors, but there's quite a lot of them. I believe who's the big one, the YouTuber, he's pretty good about the Christian thing too. Survive the Jive, I think he's a theistic pagan if I recall, but there are other ones. You're right. I mean, I'd love to have both of them on the show, but I fear that I know Varg, he denounced music recently, but I fear I would just be fanboying him about Bursum all day. I mean, I would love to have Thomas77 on as well. That would be quite interesting. So,
by the way, we got $5 Canadian from Peter Faust, who says, "Let's go. Someone say nya." Well, Alexandra.
No, God, no.
You had to pick the woman to say it on the stage.
No, I picked the first person who made a noise after I said the super chat.
That was a derisive snort.
Well, Owen, can you help us? Can you help us out here?
I will say nya out of a sense of
Oh,
there we
solidarity.
go.
Out of
There
a
we
sense of
go.
solidarity with the
Thank
online
you.
anime, the
But
online anime people.
before that, we missed a $5
Yeah,
from
super chat
Iron
from
Bob.
Super Iron Bob. Yes,
Good
who
patron
says over
of the
here?
show.
I
He says,
want to see Lev. You go
I
on,
should
go
read
on.
this.
Yes,
It's for you,
yes,
buddy.
yes,
I
yes.
want to see Lev try to lick the butter off the bread. Can't do it. Nope. Just impossible. I mean, it depends what bread we're talking about. If we're talking about a good slice of rye, then I don't know. It kind of there's some slipperiness to it.
I could
But-
bring my cat in. I could bring my cat Steve as like
We're talking about some
what-
nice Montego, as they say.
like tag team wrestling, Gio. I bring my cat in because he's got the spines on the tongue, so he can lick the butter right
Oh,
off.
that's true.
He's a butter cat. That's what he is. He's a butter cat. But there
Like
was also
the cat that's like got the piece of butter on it. He's like crying. He's like,
Well-
"Would you eat
well,
me?"
no,
that
that was an
one-
example of that was an analogy to butter dog. For those who know what butter dog is,
Peter Faust Geo dropped the nya.
good.
I'll say nya.
Good that you don't know what that
USY.
is. Modern Hermeticist, by the way, he has a comment. He says, hold on, where is this? Oh, here. Okay, so Modern Hermeticist.
By the way, speaking of
has
quiet,
a
Owen,
question.
you would love this. Owen, before we get to Modern Hermeticist, one of my favorite art critics, and I want him on the show one day. His name is Thurston Botts Borstein. He wrote the book Deculturation. I've mentioned this before, but he wrote a book before that. It's called Kawaii and Cool. It's about, I shit you not, it's about in America, Black people that are into anime, and like how
That sounds tight.
Black
Like,
culture on the
like
internet
verse.
converges with anime. I shit you not. Look up.
Yeah, I'm
this
actually
book.
down.
Yeah.
I'm down. Actually, that sounds pretty tight.
Yeah, I'll
That
send
is
you the
pretty
link.
cool.
It's amazing. If Lev, you know what, Lev, I'm just gonna send you so you can put it in the chat.
Yes, please send me. So this is the comment for Modern Hermeticist. Just ask Owen what he thinks about the third status of the Holy Spirit. I have no idea what that is, so Owen, buddy, go for it if you can. I don't know what that is.
Status of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, third status of the Holy Spirit.
Like the fact that it's third in the Trinity.
I don't know. I'm gonna look this up myself right now.
Oh, well, can you qualify what he means exactly? Because it could be a few different things. I mean, are you talking about like the Joaquim Fiore thing? Joaquim, mispronounced that name. But let me know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, I have no idea. I hope that he's still going to be here in the chat for him to be able to hear. Okay, I found something just by searching on Law of Gospel. Hold on, what is this? Abbot Joachim, Book of Illustrations. If the All-Americans had gained some knowledge about Joachim's expectation of the third, I don't know. What
I'm
this stuff
assuming
is,
that
man.
I'm gonna assume that the person's asking about like this guy named Joaquim Fiore and this idea about like the third era of the Holy Spirit. I haven't heard it called the third status, but I mean it's also just interesting to talk about, so maybe that's what he's talking about. But basically, there was this idea that came about from this guy named Joaquim Fiore, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, but I'm American, so I don't care. And basically, the idea was that you can look at like the theological history of man, and there are these eras, and there's the Old Testament era of humans being under God the Father, and then there's the New Testament era of being under God the Son. There's Jesus, but now it's this idea that we're transitioning into this new era that's the third era of the Holy Spirit, and it's going to be totally different and all this stuff. And he got condemned. I don't know if he got like officially condemned, but eventually church officials were like, I don't know. I mean, like we kind of still need Jesus and stuff. Like, what are you talking about, bro? But a lot of people trace like this vibe of this eminent era of like the spirit that's characteristic of New Age back to that. I haven't actually read his writings, but it's come up a lot in my stuff. But
And he says over here, Modern Hermeticist, he says, because that's the root of all the New Age stuff.
yeah, okay, so that's what he's talking about. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
this coincide also with the theory of that people like Carl Jaspers talked about the axial ages? Like Christ came about during a certain axial age after the Buddha and so forth. I wonder if that has a similarity to it.
Yeah, I used to be into the axial age stuff, but I actually started to be skeptical about like the precession of the Earth's axis and that whole like process anyway. So I kind of just like deported it from my worldview.
Interesting.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I guess what I could say it's interesting about the Joaquim Fiore stuff, instead of just like recapitulating the first paragraph of Wikipedia about it, is that I do, as I go deeper into my studies of different systems, what kind of starts to happen is you are getting really, really deep in like the engine and really, really deep in like the programming, let's say. And sometimes I'm like, wow, there's like bits of code in here that no one cares about. This is like really like, obsessive, ridiculous stuff. But then at the same time, you hit these little nodes where you're like, wow, this little bit buried 10,000 layers underneath here has ramifications that maybe are spilling out and characterizing the whole system itself. And when I see things like Joaquin Fiore and the trend of Western theology and the trend of the West in general, sometimes I think that maybe the answer is rooted deep down in like these fundamental posits of the system. Like I said, I don't really belong to any one group within Christianity, but I get that tension a lot between Catholicism and Orthodoxy, where someone on the Orthodox side will say, well, yeah, the West ended up going in this direction because of these really, really deep down fundamental posits buried way deep within like Catholicism. Or if you're being charitable, you could say that maybe we're misinterpreted or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's weird that you can go back. What is Joaquin Fiore, like 1200s or something, and find someone basically being like a proto New Age character. But why? What's the reason why? Couldn't really say.
There is another interesting thing that I got from what you were talking about, that tribesman who was very negative towards the way that his people used to do things. And I talked about this with Gio before, where I would almost flip the idea around that people have of seeing humanity start from a primordial, like very primitive state into something higher, where, just for the sake of imagining it, imagine if this tribesman would have been looking at the way his tribe has done things as actually being much more fallen than they were at a certain point before, which I know runs counter to the way that people see evolution of the human being, but I'm curious if that would resonate in any way with you, what I'm saying here, like where there would be a, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, it's kind of like it's like a whole separate like folder in a way, but also not really. But I think that I wouldn't really say, well, I guess I will say it this way. There's a lot of things like the evolution thing and the space thing and the galaxies and all that stuff where, like, independent of whether it's true or not, I think it does serve like a function within the larger worldview. And whether or not people think, evolution is real, like you were saying, I think it serves to promote this subtextual idea of like, yeah, and we're just getting better and better. It's always getting better and better. And it kind of naturally leads to, well, then what's around the corner? Like, there must be a new big
Whig
thing.
history,
But,
the fallacy of Whig history.
Yeah, but for me, I definitely flip that a lot as I've been going more and more. And I tend to see certain things that other people take for granted as like the original, better proto state. I kind of see them as like a degradation in a way. A good example of that, that's just kind of interesting to look into, and again, it touches with the psychedelics thing, is people are always pumping this idea of like shamanism. Like, shamanism is the original religion, and it used to be like, basically, they don't say this, but basically it was like all shamanism, and then it kind of corrupted into like these rigid belief systems but I mean, is that really
the dogma, man?
Yeah, but is that really true? I mean, a really interesting example is like, you can go back as far as you want in ancient Egypt, and where's the ancient Egyptian shamanism?
Exactly. No, the reason why shamanism... go on.
No, I was going to say they started... I mean, of course, they didn't start day one, but it seems like they started as
it seems it's Semitic
system. Yeah, and
it seems like Indo-European people don't have that. I mean, they do. I mean,
well, they were brought. I mean, if we go with the Graham Hancock thing, the Egyptians were brought their civilization to them by the survivors of the past age. But I would also say this.
I meant to say Semitic people don't have that history of shamanism as much. But
well, here's my crazy theory. Gio knows about it. This is completely ridiculous. Don't take anything I say right now seriously. But if we're talking about shamans who wear the skin of animals, I think the animals are actually people. I think animals are people that have gone through a process of devolution. They all have the same. They all have the same backbone, but their faces and skeleton had just been morphed, through time, through adaptation to their environment.
I shouldn't say West, because what you're describing is also what Protagoras believed in as well. So
interesting. I got to look up how he saw this. But yeah, like, I just look at the human form as being something very special, something divine, you could say. And
the mathematician was it Protagoras?
Maybe I know. I got to look him up.
Yeah.
But basically, like all the other animals I see as being derivatives of the human form that have gone through changes based on their
Pythagoras.
adaptations.
Sorry,
Pythagoras. Thank you.
Pythagoras. Holy shit. Protagoras is the
Pythagoras thought animals were degraded from the human.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
I
not
didn't know
Protagoras.
that. That's interesting.
He believed in very
Humans are
similar
very
to
different
reincarnation.
animals.
No, but it does make sense if you look at the human form, where you have this equal to this equal to this. I mean, you're an artist, Owen, so you must also observe things within the human form that differentiate it from a lot of the animal forms. Where the animal forms, at least to me, they seem to be stretched out. You know what I mean? Like, it's as if Mother Nature stretched the animals out in order for them to adapt to whatever environment, or else they die. While human beings, we don't really fit in anywhere in nature. Like, we have to build a shelter, we have to do external things around us, and it makes me think that there's something special here.
We're no longer. Is it bipedal where you walk on all fours?
No,
Yeah, we're no longer bipedal. We have our
That's
heads
another
up to
interesting.
the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there is no animal like us, and I think this is a good forum for exploring the cosmos.
There was
like if you were to
recently-
create one.
Well, there was recently even a book that's like really complicated theory cell shit by what's that publisher that does the acceleration stuff? Urbanomic. They have this book where it's this professor talking about how the evolution of the human skeletal structure is in a way similar to like a body horror on a cosmic level, because we were in some ways never meant to evolve in terms of like standing
conscious.
upright, but we had to by necessity. But that produces a lot of different like distinctions between man and nature and the cosmos. And he of course ties this in with all like the accelerationism stuff. which
It's
gets
just
very
so hard to
complicated.
stand up, though. That's the thing that always gets me. I mean, look, I got to
80%
study
of people
genetics.
have back pain in their lives for a reason.
No, that's because they don't. That's because already their back is not as good as it once
Also,
was.
The reason why women have such a hard time giving birth is because we're bipedal.
That's right. Yeah. And
That's also in the Bible. It's like, it's like, well, we were because we like ate from the tree of knowledge or whatever. That's why we're cursed to have such a hard time. It's like, no, it's just like literally the mechanics of like, the human pelvis and how it's oriented.
Unless the past human beings were once like giant women, and the heads of those kids were still big,
It's
but
not
they were
about head
small enough
size.
to go
It's
through.
not about head size at all. It's 100% about bipedalism. Because there's other animal species with a much larger head to body ratios, and still like the canal is like vaginal canal is still like
we have a lot of sutras,
but it is the bipedalism, it's the orientation of the pelvis, and that's why it's so painful and difficult, because you're basically trying to push your baby like sort of up and out rather than just like out.
Well, that's why don't they say that's why they recommend that women give birth like
squatting, like
squatting like they used to back in the day,
or underwater.
What really fascinates me about science is that a lot of times like there is this sort of like this sort of loopy path of like people will figure out the best way of doing something, and then for some reason like just completely renounce it and decide to do things in a worse way for specious reasons. Like the sort of normalization of like having women on their backs, like.
And there's a long genealogy of why.
It's just like a cultural conditioning thing. Where like we assume, oh yeah, of course women have, they have sex on their backs, so they'll give birth on their backs. Like, duh. Is like no.
Yeah, there are Tibetan
It's a terrible idea.
Yeah, there are Tibetan paintings I've seen where women are giving birth on all fours, like on their not on their stomachs, but they're on all fours. And
literally any way other than on your back is better.
Yeah, actually, it's funny what you said before.
Or maybe like standing on your head. That would who knows? Yeah, just like women,
well, there was that one scene in Cannibal Holocaust. Never mind.
Owen, before you responded, there was a comment, $5 from Peter Faust.
I wanted to get to that. I wanted Owen to respond, and then we'll get to, because that's a very good one by Peter Faust.
Okay. Well, first, Owen, you wanted to respond to, there was an earlier comment that somebody made that you wanted to respond to.
I was just going to say about the human form and the animal forms being stretched. Yeah, I have these golden ratio calipers here. They like measure the golden ratio. They're like these tools. And I've used them on my body, but I never actually used them on my dog. So I will do that, actually. I'm going to do that tonight. I'll see if it's like how divinely proportioned my dog is. But what's the comment? What's
the only difference that I want to say real quickly before we get to that comment
Have you used it for phenology, Owen?
Well, Well, the only difference that I would say with the human form is I think you'd find a lot of golden ratios and stuff on your dog. The difference that I would say specifically with the human head is, again, the distance from the chin to the nose, from the nose to the eyebrow ridge, from the eyebrow ridge to the top of where the hair starts growing. This is like pretty much equal. I mean, obviously it's going to be not fully, but
even like and I'm no portrait artist, but even in portrait art, you have like the Riley method, and you have Brog, where they teach you like the space between the eyelids to the nose to the back of the eyes. It's all like there's the Riley method, like there's 8 points that are roughly equal to every human face. And it's an easy metric if you like really want to get into portraiture. But
there's something
Owen, you went to art
special
school, so you have probably more experience with I'm no portrait artist. I mean, I try, but fuck. Did you, by the way, Owen, you saw, I don't know if you saw my Mussolini draw.
No, I didn't see it, but I'll check it out.
Please post it in the chat.
Here, but
and also, Gio, you should draw a furry version of it called Mussolini.
Oh God, like
or Owen, this is a free idea for you if you want to do that. Mussolini.
He has to be kind. He says, "I'll think about it."
That'll be great. You'll have a new furry fan base, a new furry Italian fascist fan base.
Don't give him the fucking. That's the Reagan Lodge approach to art. So here I have my one of Linkola. So
nice.
Petri Linkola.
Cool.
But that's when he was young, and I'll show you the Mussolini one is right here. So.
Nice, that's pretty solid, dude.
Oh,
cool.
Thank you. There's a lot of wonky stuff. I have one of Moldbug that was kind of wonkier, but let me look it up.
And everybody, subscribe now. Look at the level of
Apparently,
this.
a friend of mine put this on Urbit, so I know that Moldbug saw it.
Nice.
I should have made his face a bit longer, but
we should get him on soon. So
hopefully he's doing the. I mean, if anyone knows Moldbug on Urbit or somewhere, I know he's doing a circuit recently, but I would love to have him on. I would love to have great critics of him on, like Carlsbad, who would really. By the way, Carlsbad, you're no longer my friend. You fucking called me out on Twitter. I hate you. I'm sorry. I'm kidding. I love NT Carlsbad. But he is right. I'm kind of like a Pomo enthusiast, so he was critiquing me on that. So, but anyways, Peter Faust has this great quote for you, Owen, personally, but also other people can get in on this. So this is, and we also have another one by Liam Converse, and also by Cream Wizard. Cream Wizard. So for $5, Peter Faust, what is your answer to Nietzsche's sort of questions on how particular strains of Christianity based around love is degenerative, presumably, of the human spirit? So the genealogy of morals. What is your take, Owen?
Yeah, like slave morality and like stuff like that. I feel like that's kind of the same pocket. Well, the thing about it's not exactly what he asked, but the thing about slave morality, which is normally what the critique is with the Nietzsche crew, for my opinion, in my experience, is that slave morality actually, not that I'm fit to like critique like a great philosopher, but it's a logical fallacy called the appeal to motivation. To say, well, you have this system because you have this motivation to X, Y, and Z is a logical fallacy. Not that that makes it invalid, but I'm just saying, because it really bothers me. But the question being, the idea of appealing to love as sort of this universal principle degrading the human spirit, I just don't really see it that way. It's kind of like a very deeply unsatisfying answer. But I don't think that Christianity exists in this context that people generally try and paint it as, where like, let's say someone broke into my house and like, I'm not going to like shoot them or something. I think that kind of like cosmic love is sort of on a different level and playing field than the fallen situation that we're in and that we're a part of. I wouldn't say it's degrading to the human spirit. In fact, I kind of think it's like the opposite. I think that if you strip that out and you really start looking at, other people, maybe even you could say your enemies or something, as pure, you know, bags of meat, obstacles to be overcome. I think that that's actually like,
Huns.
I think that that's actually like what is degrading, like, to the human spirit, really. I mean, you could look at that within any like political situation or something. I mean, it doesn't really matter like what my politics are, but let's say there's a group of people where I'm like, yeah, we're enemies, and like I don't like it, and you probably don't either, but we are enemies. If it's not put into this larger folder of like, however, there is this larger theological situation that enmeshes into this particular conflict that we're having, I would say that is degrading to the human spirit, because then I'm just like an animal, and why don't I just go kill you or something?
Yeah.
Then,
Well, look at the
And
Japanese.
even
But
wait,
that's
just
the
say,
rule by the
wait, someone is,
strong.
yeah, and someone is going to hear that and say, well, yeah, maybe you should. But the thing is, even if it was like a war or something like that, let's say there was a totally justified war that I had to go be a part of, and it was, let's just say for the sake of discussion, it was completely justified. Like, yeah, those guys are fucking up our whole situation, and we have to go kill them. Like, yeah, I mean, I could do that, yeah, but it would still be put into a larger framework of this provisional conflict that I'm a part of is not absolute. It's not the absolute cosmic situation. It's a provisional conflict that I'm a part of. Maybe some people in a neighboring country are like coming and, you know, messing up our bread situation, and our people are going to starve, so we're going to go kill them. That's a provisional situation that's contingent on circumstance. It's not an absolute defining larger situation that I'm going to put myself, the essence of myself, into and say, this defines me and my nature. It's something I'm participating in, but there's a higher reality.
But would you say that there is also, even within Christianity, for example, when you look at Evola's text, Metaphysics of War, that was largely a Nietzschean pagan text. But at the same time, do you think within Christianity there's still a context for struggle and conflict and war, even if it's just a war of the self against the self, in terms of the history of conflict within Christianity? I don't know. I mean, it is kind of like you're saying, an alien dialectic as opposed to what is traditionally Christian orthodoxy. I don't know. It's one of those strange kind of gray areas.
Yeah, well, I'm not totally qualified to give I'm not actually in any way qualified to give the official answer on that, but my answer to that would be that you asked, is there a place for some type of like conflict like that within Christianity? Is that the thing about Christianity is that there's like sort of a break when people from different worldviews are talking about this kind of thing, where within Christianity, we recognize that we're in a fallen world that is unideal. So it becomes a little messy if you're saying like, well, is there a place for it? Well, yeah, dude. I mean, is there a place for like shooting burglars? I mean, I would say so, yeah. But like, is that ideal? No. So those two things seem to be in conflict. Like someone like from that worldview might ask me like, well, ideally, would you shoot someone breaking into your house? Well, ideally, no. Ideally, no. But practically, would I? Yeah, dude, I definitely would.
Well, look at the Japanese during World War II, all the torturous things that they did to the prisoners that they called like blocks of wood. You know, that's already like going beyond just practical, you know, we must kill them in order to get this island or whatever.
The key is like, you know, avoid dehumanization, understand the, you know, the reality of what is transpiring. Don't use metaphor. Don't try to like coach yourself into like disbelieving reality. If you're torturing a human being to death, like that's what you're doing. You know, you're not performing medical experiments on them. You're not, you know, I mean, you are like in that context, but like primarily you're torturing them to death.
But there may have been a reason why the Japanese were let off easier than the Germans were. Because they were, again, like a society that, even though there was the Meiji Restoration and all that, like, let's face it, they were still within, like, their own hive mind echo chamber.
Well,
for
people
a
have
pretty
some
long
theories
time.
about, some very esoteric racists have some theories about why the Germans didn't get let off, but the Japanese did. But
wait. So are there other?
No, because the Germans, they've already participated in the same kind of civilization that everybody else in Europe did. The Japanese, not so much. They came in pretty late to that party.
That is true. We do have a Eurocentric view of World War II in general, whereas opposed to what the Japanese, what they were doing throughout the whole continent of Asia was sort of like not forgotten, but it's much more, I guess, but it's different in America, because America, you have a direct memory of the war in the Pacific theater. So it's kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, it's a strange.
Yeah.
And sorry.
Real quick, are there any other super chats or questions you want to hit? Because I am going to bounce. imminently.
All right, there is one
Unfortunately,
final
I would
thing.
like to chill, but
There is one final thing I wanted to ask, which
Yeah.
is about compassion. So this was just something I decided to look up. I didn't take any closer look at it. This was just like Googling compassion Buddhism, because I was just curious like how this would contrast to the Christian ideas. So over here, just one quote. Compassion, is compassion a moral force? The answer, according to many spiritual leaders like the Dalai Lama, is a resounding yes. The experience of compassion, they assert, has a radiating effect extending kindness and forgiveness towards others, even those who have intentionally transgressed. So that doesn't sound too bad to me. But again, this is just a sentence that I read from a Google search on some site that I don't like, some Stanford University website. So I don't know. You were in this a lot longer than I am, so I'm curious. What would you say are the differences in the view of compassion in Buddhism versus Christianity?
That's a really good question, man. Well, it's really hard to say anything definitive about like what is the view Buddhism has towards X, because under Buddhism you have groups that are, in my opinion, way more disparate and different than you have under the Christian umbrella. You know, you have like people that are almost like different religions almost. What would the difference be though? I mean, of course you have the same like kind of underlying like be nice to people and stuff like that. It gets a little tripped out and different when you start incorporating reincarnation a little bit, but I don't know, off the cuff, I'm hesitant to say that it's very, very similar, but I guess you could say the idea of compassion is similar. I think the difference would be
Motivations.
the difference might be maybe motivations, both trying to get people to the end goal. But I mean, I think it's a more of a difference probably group to group based on what it means to, yeah, that would be more of a, this is a better answer. It's more of a difference like group to group based on what it means to be compassionate, because that is like a whole crazy can of worms. I mean, like if you have a friend who's like an alcoholic and he's drinking himself to death, if you beat him with like a 2x4 within an inch of his life and throw him in your basement and he stops drinking forever, is that compassionate? I mean, I don't know. I can't really tell. You know, it's kind of an extreme example, but like what it means.
What would be the Christian answer to that, by the way? Like if you were to go up to a priest and ask him,
I don't
like,
think you could
what
beat
do I
him
do
with
with
a
my friend?
2x4, but I think if you chain him in the basement to get him to stop drinking, you're in at least a gray area for sure.
Like Odysseus in the Sirens.
Yeah, but that's, I think that would be part of the difference. I mean, like, you know, within some of the more like, you could say extreme neutrally, but let's say different Christian groups, let's say I'll be like uncharitable towards my own worldview. I mean, if you have someone who's like a heretic, I mean, there were times where like, you know, speaking out against the idea of the Trinity in Europe would get you like literally killed. But they would say, well, we're being compassionate because you're endangering your soul by blaspheming against God. So we're going to kill you. And sorry, that's the compassionate thing to do. I mean, I'm not really on board with that, but the idea of like, and you know, Buddhism has, I'm sure we could find something in Tibetan Buddhism of like that,
Sure.
you know, maybe not that, but you know, so the idea of like what it means to be compassionate, I think is like conditional on like the worldview. It's kind of a cop-out answer.
Sounds pretty based though. But
No, it's interesting. I mean, it gives us a lot of territory to look at in the future. And
this one super chat by Liam Converse for $5, I think is interesting. It's also, I guess you could pertain to what we're talking about. E. Michael Jones, maybe we should get EMJ on the podcast one day.
Yeah.
EMJ posits a good explanation of how it could be monotheism actually was the first religion in the his latest book on the Logos. Look into Logi Spermatikoi. So that's pretty interesting how, in fact, monotheism was the first religion as such. I don't know if that's... and, of course, the other one by Cream Wizard is why does the golden ratio look so good? I've never heard someone go in depth into it. Was it mentioned in the Bible? Yes, I think it was.
I can answer that. That'll be the last thing I answer, and then I'm going to bounce.
All right. Yeah.
Ratio. The thing that people normally miss about the golden ratio. Wait, also just one other thing. So I'll kind of wrap up these two things, and then I'm going to go bounce and deal with my houndlet, as I call her. Yeah, that's what she's doing right now. The one thing that I would contrast with the Buddhism and Christian thing, I just thought of a good example. In Mahayana Buddhism, there is a story in the Lotus Sutra where, long story short, there's these kids in this house and the house is on fire, and this guy goes to them and he's like, I don't know if I told the story last time, sorry if I did. And this guy goes to them and he's like, hey, the house is burning down, you have to get out of it. And the kids are like, whatever, we don't get it, we're little kids. So then he goes to them and he's like, hey, on the lawn outside I have all these toys and horses, like come outside. And they come outside and there's nothing there, but he saved them from the burning house. And the point of the story was basically the Buddha in this Mahayana Sutra saying, yeah, sometimes I have to lie to you guys because you guys don't fucking get it. And that's how it is being this woke. So there is a more provisional moral system, I would say, where in some forms of Buddhism, it's like, yeah, well, if you're a Buddha, you have to lie sometimes because people aren't going to get it. And then I think that I would see that as a little different than within the Christian system of like, yeah, lying is bad de facto, period. It doesn't matter. But that's my own bias, probably because of my worldview. The golden ratio thing, this is the last thing I'll say, but I think it is worth saying because most people will kind of miss it, I think. The thing about the golden ratio that makes it the golden ratio is that it's the only proportion where this is going to be a lot easier if you're looking at something that has the golden ratio in it. So actually, if you look at one of your fingers are proportioned into the golden ratio. If you cut it at the digit, it's the only ratio, or your hand to your fingers even is the golden ratio also. It's the only ratio where the ratio of the smaller part to the larger part is the same ratio as the larger part to the whole. So what that means is that when you cut it right at that point, the small part in relationship to the big part is the same thing as the big part in relationship to the whole. So it kind of like vibrates and has this like feedback loop within itself. And in my opinion, that's part of why it has its like hyper aesthetically pleasing quality and translates to like sound and number and geometry and visuals and everything. And why it works.
Fractal situation.
Yeah, it's almost like a fractal. Exactly. If you look up something called it's hard to find it if you look up something called the golden ratio, but if you look up something called the phi ratio, that's normally like where it comes up more.
And we have Martin K who says $50, not dollars, but 50 the Nordic money. Thanks for coming on again, Owen.
Crowan?
Yes, a great stream. Ali, alo, and nya to everybody. So thank you so much, Martin K. He is a patron of ours. And also, I recommend watching this documentary called Black Hole, not H-O-L-E, but W-H-O-L-E, from this guy who's kind of like, I don't know, you could say he's also one of those new age people, but he talks about like the ratio between like the human body and like the planet and the stars and the galaxy and all that. Like, it's interesting to think about how there is this relationship between a lot of these things, mathematically speaking, and how you could, yeah.
Yeah, there's a really small book called The Golden Ratio or The Golden Mean by a guy named Dod Sutton. I think that's the guy's name. Maybe it's Dod Sutton or Scott Olson. I don't remember. It's one of those two guys. It's a good little book with a lot of pictures. But yeah, I'm going to bounce right now, guys. This was super
fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And, Owen, it's always a great pleasure. Well. Guys, please buy Owen's merch right now. Thanks, go to, and I'm going to let you go in, but I'm just going to promote you while you are gone. So here we go. Guys, thank you so much for watching this. I really appreciate everybody. I really appreciate Owen, Gio, Alexandra. And now I'm going to load up the page, which has all the merch on it from Owen. I just bought a shirt
Owen, do you have
today.
a Patreon or?
Yeah, I'll show. Yeah, so it's funny at the end. If you made it all the way to the end, you probably are at least somewhat interested in the vibe. Yeah, I have a Patreon that really helps me out running the whole art thing. The main hub is my Twitter. I'm also on Instagram. It's at Owen Broadcast. And I got
here we go. Here
with shirts
your
and stuff.
Patreon.
But I got some dope stuff coming out soon, so it should be pretty cool. I can't say exactly what, but I'm always machinating in the studio. It's where I am right now. I'm surrounded by like paper cutters and paint and paintings and all this stuff in here. So some cool stuff is going down.
Here is the Patreon for Owen Cyclops.
I'm going to get into the Patreon game soon when I also release my shopping website. So.
Excellent.
Nice.
And here is the Shopify over here. Buy his stuff. I just bought for my mom today the Don't Eat the Lotuses shirt. Very beautiful shirt. So
Shop and Bazaar.
Yes, exactly. So Owen, brother, thank you so much for coming in, and I can't wait till we do the psychedelic stream. We're gonna get Daniel Pinchbeck in here, and we are going to have quite a time. So
cool, man.
Thank you again, brother. I really appreciate it.
I'll talk to you guys soon. See ya.
See ya. So guys, this is the very end. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. God bless.
All right.
And don't forget
to wear real clothes next time. I was like debating this and like fuck it. Like,
no, this kind of looks like the trad outfit. You know, like the trad girl meme.
What? I actually have. Next time I'll wear my actual trad girl dress.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
I'll dress up. I'll do a different theme for every stream.
That would be so
That'd
fun.
be
I love it.
amazing.
Yeah.
And tomorrow, oh, by the way, tomorrow, Free for All Friday, I completely forgot to promote this, so I'm going to do it right now. Tomorrow, we are talking Sonic the Hedgehog, and if you guys like Sonic
Well,
R...
we'll talk about other things, hopefully. I mean, oh god,
Yes.
Sonic's
Well, the first hour, we're going to be talking Sonic the Hedgehog, and we're going to have TJ Davis, who did the vocals for Sonic R, which is the video game where you race a Sonic, not with the stupid cars or the vehicles or whatever, the surfboards. No, you race a Sonic with his feet, like he's meant to. So watch that.
Oh, it's not
and
the 3D one that the kid was freaking out about.
It is the 3D
Sonic
one.
Oh,
Well, it
that's
is
the
3D
worst
one.
one. No.
But
Sonic
the music
is a good game. Okay, you remember that kid, the Sonic kid?
Okay, I don't remember the Sonic Kid. I remember the
Oh
JonTron
no, the
review
backpack.
of Sonic R. No, I got to take a look at that.
Yeah, he was freaking out about Sonic R because they made it 3D. So Sonic, what's his name? There's a whole wavy web surf on him. Rant against Sonic fan base. He ruined Sonic. Sammy Classic Sonic fan. Shout out to Sammy Classic Sonic fan. Holy crap. He fucking hated that. He bodied that game because it was 3D.
We should have him on. But TJ Davis, she did the vocals for Sonic R. She did the song "Can You Feel the Sunshine" and a lot of other great
I
songs
want to
from that
tell
game.
TJ Davis, you ruined
No,
Sammy
she had
Classic
nothing to do
Sonic
with
fan's
it.
life.
She had nothing to do with it. She was just doing the music. But anyway, we also have another special. Well, here's who we have tomorrow, by the way. So we have NTom64. We have Hotep Sophia. She is back. Conscious
finally.
Moss. MK Ultra Money, Finsimist, Luke Valentine is back with us. We have Metaphor Man. We have, well, of course, we also have Alexandra. You are coming
it'll
back
be
tomorrow.
so nice. It'll be so nice to have another woman on the stream. Holy shit, I'm sick of this sausage fest.
Well,
And
our good friend
we
Hotep Sophia is a woman, so
yes,
Well, yeah, I just
that makes three
use
women.
female
Excellent.
pronouns,
So then we
why
have
I made that assumption.
the Terrence. The Terrence is coming as well. And we also have special guest Zachary Elwood, who is a professional poker player, and he is the host of the psychology podcast People Who Read People. His work into online deception has been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, and many more publications. So there we go. We are bringing it all to you live because we love you and we want to give you the best damn
So
entertainment.
tomorrow's stream is going to be a total disaster.
Don't say
No.
that, Gio. It's going to
We're
be
going to
great.
talk about psychology, Sonic, other various forms of things that should never be brought up in polite conversation. So
Exactly. And also here's what else is happening. So next week, Tuesday, March 2, we are going to have the Cyberpunk stream, and that one's going to be with Chaos Prime. Ostov crunches the numbers, and it's also going to be with Zero HP Lovecraft. So
Nice.
he is coming back for that. Another Free for All Friday on Friday, March 5th. On Tuesday, March 9th, we are doing a stream about the entertainment industry. On Thursday, March 11th, we are doing a stream about the state of Europe with Alexander Bard as one of our guest panelists.
I wonder if we could get Niccolo Salo on with Alexander Bard in terms of European politics. That'd be
Please
like,
bring him on.
if
And
someone
then-
knows Prog Rock Farmer on Twitter, Niccolo Salo, if he could come on with Alexander Bard, because he is an expert on European politics, that would be crazy. I know yeah.
And then we're going to have for Tuesday, March 16th, John Stokes, who is the co-founder of Ars Technica, and he's a very big weaponry enthusiast.
God, no.
So
Ars Technica.
he's coming. We're doing it, man. I'm excited. And we are also going to have, we may have the psychedelic stream on Thursday, March 18th. We're going to figure that out. And then Tuesday, March 23, the great Sean Lang is coming back for a sewing discourse. He is the great English professor who joined us that time on Free for All Friday, and he
Nice.
is coming back. And finally, Thursday, March 25, we are going to have Grit Cult sewing discourse with Grit Cult.
Finally.
Finally.
By the way,
so that is
for
happening.
those, two things. Go watch my video I just uploaded today. It's critiquing this article by The Walrus, which, if people don't know, it's the knockoff version of Jacobin Magazine if you're Canadian. It's the Canadian Jacobin Magazine. It's about Zoomers versus millennials on the internet. It's very great. But speaking of Grit Cult did an excellent podcast with my good friend Alex Kashuta, who I was also on. Go look up Alex Kashuta, Grit Cult, her podcast. It's great. Highly recommend it. So, and Lev, if you could, what is her pod? It's called Subversive Podcast. So look up Subversive Podcast, Alex Kashuda, and Grit Cult.
Here we go.
And
Grit Cult, what is our future? I'm putting it into the BTR chat right now. This is how fast I am. I'm almost as fast as Sonic the Hedgehog. That's how fast I am.
Oh,
so
wow.
Here we go. Grit Cult, what is our future? Check that out. And
one day we will have Alex Kashuda on, but because she lives in Romania, it's a scheduling.
Yeah, but
so.
we'll do it. We will make it work. I mean, the European stream, that's going to start from 2 p.m.
Oh, by the way, one more thing before we go. I have to shill. One more thing.
Go for it.
Our good friend of the show, my good friend Joel Davis, recently came out in combination with Imperium Press, and also Imperium Press has expressed interest in coming on the show. Go to his Twitter. It's linked there. It's called firstness.org. It's a journal that he started. Firstness. The first edition came out. It's with a bunch. It's only 4 articles, but it's good, solid articles. Shout out to Joel Davis. I'm currently reading through all of them. Firstness.com. It's by Imperium Press as well. So maybe Lev, if you could. Yeah, there you go. So that's my final shout out. Go and read it. Go and watch the Grit Call podcast. Go and watch my video.
Yes.
And yeah.
And again, Porco Rosso, is that a movie that you like? Are you into a lot of Miyazaki films?
Yeah, why not? I mean, not like unduly. I just thought it was funny as a name. Sometimes, like, generally my usernames are just things that like I just pick off the top of my head.
Well, follow her on Twitter right now. You only have 9 followers. We got to change this. So follow Alexandra right now. You're wonderful, Alexandra. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, follow Gio on Twitter. I can't believe anybody here is not following Gio on Twitter. How dare you not follow him?
And my YouTube, I have to get to 1,000 subscribers, please.
Yes, this is his YouTube right over here. So follow on YouTube. John Jafari, yeah, that would be pretty good. I may have the number of his a person who works with him. But anyway, so, and also while we're at it, follow me on Twitter. Why not? I have a lot of interesting dreams that I have that I'm going to write down. I had an interesting dream last night. So follow me on Twitter right here. I'm going to post some more animations, artwork, things of that nature. And this is pretty much it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate our guests. And Owen Cyclops today was amazing, phenomenal. And looking forward to more tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be Free For All Friday, so be sure to go in there, set a reminder, 5 o'clock tomorrow, be there, be square. Anyway, take care, I love you, bye-bye. Subscribe.
God bless, goodbye.
Bye-bye.